Lightfoot's loss in Chicago last week has Democrats across the country trembling in fear because they would stand for nothing unless their own power is at stake. An Economist YouGov poll sampled Americans just over a week ago, and it had Biden's overall approval rating on crime barely standing at 32%, with 50% disapproving. Congressman Andrew Clyde of Georgia, who introduced the resolution to block the D.C. Council's pro-crime law, joins me now. Congressman, congratulations, and thank you. As a resident of D.C. and on behalf of people that work in the district, it's great to see this.
Well, thank you, Jen. I appreciate speaking with you tonight. Well, you know, it's really important. People's safety is important to them. And that's what this was all about. You have the D.C. Council passing a law that lowers penalties for violent crimes. That just doesn't make any sense when you see crime on the rise here in Washington, D.C. And so we in Congress have the ultimate authority. We have the legislative power and the responsibility to manage Washington, D.C. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution. And so therefore we exercised that. We saw a need. We had residents from Washington, D.C. coming to us saying, this is a problem. This is a serious problem. Please help. Well, the Democrat leadership in D.C. would not listen to them, so we do. We do listen to them. And we want the people in Washington, D.C. and all the visitors in Washington, D.C. to be safe when they come to this city. And
that is so greatly appreciated. I've lived in this area 12 years, and it certainly has gotten so much worse in just the last couple of years. Very concerning for anyone who lives here, and certainly all the people that travel to our nation's capital throughout the year. And, you know, it was interesting because D.C., they tried to backtrack and withdraw the bill. The Senate, of course, voting on it anyway. But Joe Biden had also said previously that he opposed striking down this soft on crime bill. Why do you think we're seeing this sudden change of heart from Democrats?
Well, I think, as you mentioned a little earlier with Lori Lightfoot in Chicago, the Democrats across the nation are seeing that being soft on crime is not a winning message. That puts people's lives at risk. It puts their livelihoods at risk. It puts their families at risk, and their personal safety is at risk. And people care about that, and therefore they want their political leaders to do things that keep them safe. And that's not what's been happening, not here in D.C., not in Chicago. And as a result, they're speaking with their vote. And I think Lori Lightfoot getting 18% of the vote terrified the other Democrats. And I think correctly so, President Biden doesn't want to be seen as soft on crime, but that's exactly what he would have been seen as if he would have vetoed this bill.
And, you know, it's interesting, Congressman, because crime really has a lot in common with drug use. I mean, you start out with the small stuff, you work your way up. And this is what D.C.'s police chief had to say about the crime in the city this week. Listen.
The average homicide suspect has been arrested 11 times prior to them committing a homicide.
11 times. I mean, we see so many of these crimes happening here in New York City where these people have long rap sheets. I mean, does this prove that keeping criminals in jail is actually more sympathetic than having these woke prosecutors let people off, these petty thieves, letting them off the hook?
Well, I'll tell you, a great example of this was the Congresswoman Angie Craig. The very morning of the vote, she was assaulted in the elevator in her apartment complex to a guy that had a rap sheet of 12 prior offenses. Think about that. If she hadn't have acted quickly with a hot cup of steaming coffee, we don't know what would have happened to Angie, and that's incredibly concerning. And as a result, we passed this bill in the House. 250 to 173. The Senate passed it today at a phenomenally bipartisan margin, 81 to 14. And it's going to go to President Biden's desk, and I hope he keeps his word and signs this bill into law. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, this should be one of the safest cities in the country. But Congressman, kind of shifting gears a little bit, last week we spoke with one of your colleagues, Andy Biggs, talking about the possible hearings on AT&T and DirecTV's censoring of Newsmax. He says that could come perhaps as soon as 3 or 4 weeks. Can you give us any insight as to how Republicans are preparing? And are there any Democrats that you've heard of that are concerned as well about this blatant censorship that we're seeing?
No, I've not seen any Democrats actually concerned about this, but Andy's on the Oversight Committee, which is great, and that's the proper committee that should look into this. You know, I'm on Appropriations, And you know, there might be an angle on appropriations as well, but this is very concerning when you have a news outlet that is being censored simply because it's conservative by a liberal media giant, if you will call them that, DirecTV. And so I think it's certainly something Congress should look into.
Well, we appreciate that and appreciate you coming on tonight, Congressman Andrew Clyde of the great state of Georgia. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jen.